My son, Monty Marquette, died on the day he was born. I really loved being pregnant. I was obsessed with these cloth nappies, fitted cloth nappies, and they came in all these shapes and sizes. And I used to hang out with this feminist posse of women online on Saturday nights, and we'd be discussing which was more absorbent, the hemp or the bamboo. It was a true obsession. I went to meetups and learnt the art of baby wrapping. And there were a whole lot of things that I was looking forward to in that time. I really loved the newness of the journey. I loved the stretch. Monty used to get his head caught in this very unusual spot right over here. My labour started. I laboured at home, moved into the hospital. And during my labour, my baby and I were working together through the contractions. And during labour, it's quite normal for when a contraction comes on, the baby's heartbeat just dips a little bit. When the contraction eases, the baby's heart rate comes back up. But in the last hour of labour with Monty, his heartbeat didn't recover in the way that it should. There was something wrong with Monty's heart. So we had a code red, and I was rushed out of my beautiful birthing room into another room full of people, full of machines. They pushed the forceps around Monty's head. They attached the suction cup, and somebody said to me, "Jessie, you've got to get Monty out now." And I pushed with everything that I had. And despite the acuteness in the air, I felt a complete bliss when he was born, because he was a 10-pound baby. And I laid back and I felt the relief and the exhaustion just wave over me. And a few moments later, Siobhan Lee, the obstetrician on call, came into my face. And she had such empathic eyes. And she said, "Jessie, I'm very sorry, but your baby has died." And she placed him on me. And I held my babe. I held Monty, my Monty Marquette. And all the noise in the room went soft. And I howled. We were wheeled out of that room into another room. And over the next 2 days, it was like Central Station. There were people coming in and out of the room, hospital staff, obstetricians, nurses and doctors. But my family were with me. I had my father taking photographs, and I had my birth doula seated at the end of my bed, and my mother was weeping on my lap. And my partner was there. He was playing this concierge role at the door, just welcoming people in to be with us. And his best mate, Glenn, was there the whole time, sitting in the corner, just reading the newspaper. And there were moments of pure intimacy and silence, punctuated by hospital staff coming into the room and asking me what I wanted for dinner. And I remember what was on the menu. It was chicken tikka, chicken masala, or chicken vindaloo. We were discharged the following day with a hospital brochure that read, "Arranging a funeral for your baby." How many women have been given this brochure? But in the midst of all of this, something happened that changed my life. We started the Groundswell Project in response to the question of, what would it take for us all to know what to do in a situation such as this? For the past 8 years, we have shone a light on death, and we have held that light up as a vision for an Australian society in which everyone knows what to do when faced with dying or grieving. Because being with our people, that's where most of us wish to be when we're faced with this. And when we gather to support someone in death, we are individually, collectively, and communally thoroughly changed by this experience. In the hospital, something happened that changed my life. A social worker came in and she sat down next to me and she said, "Jess, you know you can take Monty home. And before she said that, I was so broken. I was so frozen. I was so fractured. But I got this energy. I got this excitement. And I thought, I could do that. And so we did. Stop all the clocks. Cut off the telephone. Prevent the dog from barking with a juicy bone. Silence the pianos, and with a muffled drum, bring out the coffin. Let the mourners come. We took my son home for 3 days, and everyone met him, my friends and my family and my neighbours and my friends from work. And we had music playing 24/7. It was Nick Drake's Pink Moon. There's a lot of drinking going on. We had beer, champagne, copious cups of tea. A friend of mine was studying Chinese medicine, and she got out her books and she brewed a brew just for me. And my brother, my poor brother Matt, I heard this kerfuffle going on outside in the stairwell, and the door flings open, and there's my brother holding this very large, very heavy framed mirror from our childhood home in New Zealand, which my father gave to him back then, but it was an object that I always coveted. And on this day, my mother said, "Matt, you're going to give that to Jess." And he's holding it, and I stood there, and I looked at him, and he looked at me, and I said, "It took this for you to give me that?" I had another friend put on a load of washing, but she forgot to separate the whites from the colours. So everything came out pink. And these were my clothes. We had a feeling of just thick soup love in my home. It was like we were in a cocoon, but anyone could join. To sit in vigil for us was beautiful, and we felt triumphant. And I saw my son's skin change. He was cold to touch, but for me it was okay because I knew he had died. And he was never alone. We bathed him and we dressed him and we held him. In Australia, we're pretty good in a crisis, right? It's kind of this iconic idea of being able to gather when the shit's hit the fan. And when I think of our farmers and I think of floods and I think of the role that the SES plays, it's an iconic idea, but it's something that is true and it's something that nationally we're kind of proud of. But we don't tend to do this in death. And why is that? I mean, 10 out of 10 of us are going to die at some point in our lives. Why don't we do that? Well, this is the thing that we're trying to change at Groundswell. So 5 years ago, we decided to announce a day called Dying to Know Day. We figured every other social issue had a day. Death needed to have one too. So we chose the 8th of August. And we just put the word out. We had a bit of a social media following, and we said, would anybody like to gather their friends or their people in their neighbourhood and have a conversation around death, dying, grief, any topic that has to do with that? It's up to you. We're not funding anything. We have no money. Go for it. Let's see what happens. And in that first year, there were 23 events registered across Australia. And we thought, this could be a thing. Let's do it again next year. 40 events, year 2. And it may not surprise you to learn that the numbers have gone up each year. And this year, in August, in a 4-week period, there were over 160 events across Australia. And these range from 20 people in a bar talking about death and dying to 800 people coming to a festival. And what this is telling us is that there is a social change movement happening. And it's about reclaiming dying and grief in a way that just makes sense to people. And it's not just happening in Australia. This is happening internationally. It's called the Compassionate Communities Movement, and it's been growing for the past 10 years. And it's primarily happening in the Western countries, because 2 centuries ago we outsourced our death and dying to the professional services. So it's time we start taking it back, and we're seeing this happen. And the most exciting thing is that we've been researching with Western Sydney University what happens to people when they gather to support someone in loss. And the people that we've spoken to, they don't talk about their experience like it was a burden. They talk about what they learned, and they talk about wanting to pay that learning forward. and they've developed their death literacy. And compassionate communities is much like, for me, when my friends and my family gathered, but it's bigger. It's connecting unknown people in neighbourhoods where they live. So, of course, life has a tendency to go on when you're grieving. Around you, despite you. 3 weeks after Monty's vigil, I had to go back to work. I had a profound, life-changing experience, and I had to go back into an office. And I remember that first day. I was shaking on the inside and I was shaking on the outside because, of course, for months in that moment, I'd imagined coming with a pram and with a baby to show off. But it was not so much that, it was this incredible guilt that I felt, that I was the cause of other people's discomfort, the cause of other people's pain. And I stepped into that lift, and I remember standing there and looking up at the levels 1, 2, 3, 4, and the lift doors open. There's a receptionist desk and a whole nother world that I no longer related to. But my friends and my boss, they helped me to cross back into their world because they came to my home and they met my son and they said his name, Monty, and they asked me what I needed and they gave me space to feel. And that workplace was my lifeline. And I stayed for years and I became the boss because I just loved them so much for what they did for me. But I went back out into a neighbourhood that did not know my grief. I had no cultural symbols, no black dress, but I'd placed a flashing sign around my neck that said, "See me, I'm in pain, he's not here and I miss him." I would walk out of my front door and I couldn't walk. I didn't want to go up to the shops because the man up there wasn't kind to me and I couldn't face him. I didn't want to go to the dog park because there were too many people there. And what I wanted was to feel not so alone with this pain. I wanted to be seen, but I wanted to be away. And I think back then to my thoughts, and at the time I thought it was my job to fit back in to normalcy. But I don't believe that anymore. I think it's a two-way street. I mean, what would it mean if we found a way to publicly recognise someone in grief? Because we're all going to have that at some point in our lives. We must give grief intentional space. We must see people in that space, and we must be seen in that space. Over those past 3 days, those people that came into my home, they were sweaty and uncomfortable. They were confident. They didn't know what to do, but they showed up. My experience of Monty's death and how we did it, it transformed me and it transformed my friends. Because in that experience, we remembered what it meant to be human. And evoked in us was this ancient knowing that we're all mortal. And that's the deal that we have. And what a beautiful thing to be reminded of. We are the ones who will bear witness to the dyings that lay ahead of us. And you will be these people. The sweaty, the uncomfortable, the confident, the beer buyer, the tea maker, the Chinese broth brewer, the laundry doer. Start your compassionate communities by strengthening your relationships. Reach out to your neighbours. Hold a gathering for Dying to Know Day. Visit your friend who's grieving and put on a load of washing, but don't forget to separate the whites from the colours. And just know that this doing, it will change you. Thank you very much.